Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tea and Tattered Pages. I am T, I like to read books, and finally, after a few months, I have my review for The Devils by Joe Abercrombie ready. I filmed a reading vlog for this book, and I really wanted to get that out first, but I realized I'm never gonna get that done. So, while I struggle with editing that video, you should probably have the review just to get a little taste for something. So I thought I could just spend this nice Sunday doodling and giving you all my thoughts on The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, which is actually the first Joe Abercrombie book I've ever read. So let's jump right in. I actually picked this book up on a whim after seeing it come across my FYP on TikTok. It was highly praised by creators with generally similar opinions to mine, so I felt quite safe going into this book semi blind. Let me set the stage for you. We are in an alternate universe medieval Europe, in a world where Troy is now a full on empire. Our story basically starts in not Vatican, aka the Holy City as it's called in the book, where the Catholic Church is pretty much the same, except gender swapped. And the Pope is a 10-year-old girl. And she can do actual magic. And instead of the barbarian invasions being the looming threat of the era itself, all in all, a pretty promising concept. Plus, I personally really enjoyed the way Abercrombie stayed history adjacent for the majority of his world building, thus creating a world that simultaneously felt strange and familiar. It was actually quite fun to start making the connections between this world and actual European history as I read the book. Our story follows the Chapel of Holy Expediency, the 13th chapel of the church, which is essentially comprised of criminals forming quite literally a squad to carry out the church's work, led by a monk. The beginning of the book was quite strong. I really enjoyed the sort of trope subversion element of the book, as in taking the usual good people forced to do bad things trope and flipping it to bad people being forced to do good people activities thing, which I really enjoyed reading about. Now, reading this book, I could tell that Joe Abercrombie was aiming for a character driven story versus a plot driven one. However, this is where things started to quickly fall off, at least in my book. No pun intended. There were, it seems to me, too many characters for the author to juggle, resulting in a lot of them ending up forgotten in the grand scheme of things, or left out of the constant POV changes for large swaths of time, resulting in the reader almost forgetting that there is yet more people to be dealt with and to deal with. Our first character is Brother Diaz, who is a monk and the leader of the mission. He actually never wanted to be a monk, which is something he has to face off with a few times throughout the book, and I found quite interesting. Out of all the characters, I'd say he's one of the most consistent ones, and his trajectory from the beginning to the end of the book is actually quite satisfying. Then we have Alex. Alex is supposedly a long lost princess and heir to the throne of the Trojan Empire, but has lived her life as a thief in the Holy City, unaware of her true identity. For being the closest thing to a protagonist this book had, Alex felt surprisingly unremarkable. Even though she has grown up on the streets, she's quite a damsel in distress, and the most interesting thing about her character is following her journey to finally discovering her self confidence. She did read as very YA at some points, which in certain contexts is not bad at all, but at this specific instance, it felt like a very strange contrast to all the other characters, who were much more in line with the overall tone of the book. Even her romantic subplot in the last half of the book felt very underwhelming and YA like, which did not at all serve her greater character arc, and generally didn't add pretty much anything to the book. I will say, I quite enjoyed her twist at the end, her admitting that she actually knows that she's not the real Princess Alexia because she had watched her die and stole her identity. I did suspect her of being a fraud at first, but the book actually did a really good job of convincing me that it was out of the question as the journey went on. So, her coming back and admitting to actually being a fraud at the end felt quite right to me. Then we have Baptiste, who is a mercenary, and she's the character that has literally done every single thing under the sun and has worked with every single person under the sun. While she wasn't the most remarkable of the cast, I can confidently say that in my mind she was one of the most useful and one of the most productive. And I would have liked seeing her savviness expanded upon more. While she had the perfect foundation for a character, not having enough page time unfortunately reduced her to more of a trope than the full person she could have been. Then we have Jacob of Thorn, who is an old knight cursed by a witch to never be able to die. He has been alive since the Crusades, constantly reinventing himself to be able to fly under the radar, and he is the only person in the mission not under a papal binding. He's actually a willing part of the chapel. Throughout the book, he's very grumpy and grumbly, but he always pulls through at the end, dispatching the enemy and helping the mission go on. Still, I would have been more interested to see more aspects of his personality and also more of his crusader past catching up to him. But you get what you get. The next character is Baron Ricard, who is your friendly neighborhood vampire. This character appeared so sporadically that I honestly kept forgetting that he was part of the squad. And after a certain point in the book, I quite literally started believing that even the author himself kept forgetting he had this character to write. He would conveniently pop up to save the day when literally every other solution had already been exhausted, only to once again fade into the background and be forgotten until he once again needed to magically pop up to save the day like a Deus Ex Machina. And next is Sunny, the elf assassin. I wished more time was spent on her relationship with Jacob of Thorn, actually expanding on both of these characters and her struggles with loneliness and friendship. It's very interesting to me to see a character used to fending for herself and being an outsider, essentially, latching onto the immortal guy whose back nobody has, because even if he gets stabbed there, he will survive anyways, and choosing to be by his side and help him in battle. Overall, I think she was my favorite in the story for no particular reasons. She was interesting from the get go. She carried the dichotomy of being one of the enemy in a world where the majority of characters we interact with are way worse than she is. And honestly, she's probably the one character where the constant dry, bitter humor doesn't feel off or forced. It feels entirely natural and at times quite funny coming from Sunny the Elf. Then, Balthazar, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but Balthazar Sham Ivam Draxi, who insists on being called by his full name, is a necromancer. The practical value of his character is asserting the holiness of the Pope, as he spends the majority of the book trying and failing to break out of her papal binding. He was probably the most interesting out of all the characters, at least in my mind, and I wish it was actually developed a bit more, as from a certain point onwards, his character just became a monotone circle with not much evolution or expansion, which made him fade into the background for me. Whereas other characters that could have been less remarkable than he was actually featured more prominently in my mind, just because they had more of a storyline going on for them. And then we have Vigor the Werewolf. As a character, she started out as one of my least favorites, but I can't deny that she's one of the most solid and fleshed out of the bunch, which over the course of the book led to me developing a fondness for her. While she can be a bit of a caricature at times, The way Abercrombie commits to the bit and decides to stretch it to its extreme without at any point laughing at it or trying to be meta about it is what makes her work so well. Plus, her constant struggle with the werewolf side was beautifully written, and I often found myself really feeling for her and understanding her struggle in a way I honestly did not expect. All in all, while all the characters are interesting as concepts, none of them got the time or care that they needed to properly flourish on the page, thus leaving me feeling a bit half hearted at pretty much all of them. Most of them end up staying at just that, a concept. The charming vampire, the grumpy knight, the scared not princess, the elf with no friends, yet at no point are they developed beyond the archetype that they hold at the beginning of the book. They all suffer because of it, with Baptiste and Baron Rickard having it the worst out of everyone, especially Baptiste, whose death at the end of the book feels largely anticlimactic and underwhelming, since we haven't had the time to properly bond with her as a character, and thus feel any emotion towards her death. Part of me wants to say that the easy solution would be to cut two or three characters to be able to divide the page time more evenly and give the rest of them a bit more time to shine on the page, but honestly, I understand why Abercrombie wanted to keep all of them. The combination of so many different antithetical beings with the same goal in mind really does work in a world of epic adventuring and magical battles. Still, it needed more time to marinate in order to achieve its full potential. I would have loved to get better acquainted with pretty much all of these characters, and I really hope that Joe Abercrombie pays greater attention to fleshing them out in the next installment of the series. Now, the actual writing style of the book was very enjoyable. Abercrombie's prose flows by beautifully, and I found this book to have a very unique and distinct voice that I had a good time reading. As far as writing talent goes, the author definitely has plenty, and based on that alone, I would like to explore more of his works. I did struggle with one thing as far as the writing goes, which was, for some reason, don't know why, this read like a J. Christoph book to me. And since I'm already not a fan of Jake Christoph, this could have negatively impacted my feelings towards this book before I even had a chance to start getting tired with the story itself. Future me popping in to elaborate on this note. The only Jake Christoph books I've read are his Nevernight trilogy, which I actually never finished. So any opinions I have on his writing stems from that. That said, I think the thing that made this book read Jake Christophy to me was the constant and at times unnecessary, quote unquote, dark or dirty humor, even at times where it did not serve any purpose at all. Let me make myself clear, I am not opposed to the use of this kind of humor. In fact, I actually love it when it is used correctly. However, the constant dark jokes were so jam packed into this novel, even at points where the humor was absolutely unnecessary and very quickly became predictable and tiring. Had they been more spread out across the book, I think I would have enjoyed them a lot more. Plus, how many times do you need to talk about feces in a single book? Again, a few times is fine, but hammering down on your characters constantly having to interact with fecal matter, down to descriptions of how one of them at some point uses it to write because he has nothing else to write with, it can get a bit much. And I think the combination of these two elements is what made me draw the comparison to Jay Christoph's writing, because from what I've read from his catalogue, he's also overindulgent with them. Also, although to give credit where it is due, Abercrombie is nowhere near as indulgent as J. Christoph, in my opinion. And also, while in Christoph's case it was at some point enough for me to just DNF the series I was reading in the middle of the last book and swear off any of his books, Abercrombie still managed to hold me till the end and still has me considering picking up more of his books. And since this rant got way bigger than I anticipated, let me repeat, I greatly enjoyed the way Joe Abercrombie writes. If he wasn't such a good writer, I probably would have DNF'd this book, so the fact that I stuck around is a big plus in my books. Also, the reason you see me ranting this much about this book is because I can see the potential. I see potential, I see talent, I see skill, which is why the overall result of the book makes me frustrated. Let's talk about the plot, which is where my gripes with this book lie. It was To put it plainly, very repetitive. It followed a sequence of our gang is making their way to Troy. They meet some friends that will help them. They're intercepted by one of Alex's evil cousins, who were literally indistinguishable from each other. It felt like I was reading the same exact character, just with a different name every time. They manage to pull through the battle, they kill the cousin after nearly dying themselves, Jacob of Thorn, wink wink, and continue on their journey. Repeat like 3 or 4 times, and bam, you have 80% of the book. Now, if this book were written by anybody else, I probably would have DNF'd it, as I keep saying, but Joe Abercrombie is such a good writer that he still made me want to stick around and see what happens next. Now, the last 20% is where things start to look up. However, after I was weighed down for over 3 weeks by the first 80%, I was just glad this book was flowing by faster so I could be done with it, which is a shame. I really wish that the rest of the book could have been more in line with this final segment, because this way, at least it would have been exciting. The villains were finally different, the stakes felt higher, and I wish I could have had this way earlier in this book, because we probably wouldn't be here in the first place. Overall, I feel like I got more of a sense of what Abercrombie wanted this book to feel like, rather than actually getting those vibes myself from the book. I think the best way to describe the overall reading experience is frustrating. Joe Abercrombie would dangle pieces of an incredible idea in your face to lure you in, only to then focus on the most boring aspects of it for its actual storyline. The characters were all interesting and laid, but there were so many of them splitting into so many different subplots that it was hard to keep track and even just keep up with most of them. This book leaves me very torn. On the one hand, it's very clear in my mind that I can't rate this book any higher than 2 or 2.5 stars. On the other, this book contained such beautiful nuggets of Joe Abercrombie's brilliance as a writer that it feels wrong to rate it this low. I'm caught in a conundrum. This book has simultaneously made me want to never touch a Joe Abercrombie book ever again in my life, and want to pick up more of his books just to prove myself that yes, I am right in thinking that he's actually a good writer who I just happened to get to know through not his best work. This book is actually the first in a series which I did not know. Will I be reading the next book? I'm not sure yet. We'll see when it comes out, we'll see where I am, we'll see how I feel. I have not formed an opinion on that yet. But yes, this has been my review of The Devils, and my first attempt at posting an actual book review on my channel. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you've read this book, please leave a comment and let's chat about this book, because I'm just so torn and so frustrated, and I don't know what to think, if you weren't able to tell already. But yeah, I hope you like this stupid little art piece that I made. It's my favorite kind of thing to make when I just want to de-stress and have fun with a little sketch, and I tried to just use the same colors as the devils to do this. As in what's coming next on this channel, I am trying very hard to edit my devils reading vlog and another reading vlog I filmed this summer. I'm halfway through working on a review for A Tempest of Tea and the Steeping of Blood by Hafsah Faizal, which I'm hoping to have out soon-ish, because those are easier to film and make. Plus a surprise idea containing a book I ordered today that you will see hopefully sometime next week. But yeah, I hope you're having a lovely day, and I hope today is even lovelier. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, because I have 0 subscribers right now. Leave a comment, like this video, send me pictures of your cats on my socials. I can link my TikTok down below. Enjoy your day, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!